Good morning. All right, so I want you to close your eyes. And as you do, I want you to imagine yourself in a dark room, a movie theater, in fact. And when you enter the movie, you're late. So you know how that feels. You're trying to both gracefully find your seat, not bother people as you do. And of course, the movie has started without you. So as you situate yourself, you manage to sit gracefully, and you start to focus on the film, you suddenly realize, wait a second, it's talking to me specifically. Your name flashes on the screen, and two questions appear. The first question is, hey, where are you going? And it knows you by name, so you're a little surprised by that, and you're like, me? And it kind of flashes, yes, you. So you're like, where am I going? Let me think about that. Like, you start to wonder, do you mean destination? It goes, yeah. So as you start following that labyrinth, it flashes at you again with the second question. And the second question is, and who are you bringing with you? Now that's where the plot thickens, right? So for the purposes of our talk this morning, go ahead and open your eyes for a moment. And notice that you are in a theater of sorts. You are in a semi-dark room as we speak. But notice this room for a complete moment, like what your ass feels like sitting on the chair, what you're looking at directly. Notice without any concern that you're going to be feeling strange. Look who's to the side of you again, because some of you already connected. Look who's exactly behind you. And really look, like stand up to do it even. Just do it. Do it like a child would do it, just out of sheer curiosity. And as you're looking around, let your eyes meet the perfect stranger. And when those eyes meet the perfect stranger, hold the gaze. Now try it. You might be a little shy, but try it. As you take in the moment of this perfect strangeness, why did you not hold the gaze? That's another question. The second is, now ponder on this for a moment, because I want you to go back and hold the gaze. Now, take the next few moments to really connect with them. If they're far in the room, get up and go there and give them the quick answer to those two questions. Go. I love it. But remember, the movie is still going, remember? You just missed another part of the movie, but that's okay. Think about what just did happen. Reflect on it, and I just want to take a quick poll. How many of you said, I want to travel the world? How many of you might have said something like, I want to start my own business? How many of you said, I want to find that significant partner? Woo! I'm really curious about you guys. How many of you said, I want to start a family? Well, hell. I am in fascinating company for sure. But I want to ask a more significant question for this talk. Did anybody say to each other, I am going to die? All right, now the usual suspects, since Erilyn put her hand up, and her brother and I, now some of you whippersnappers might be going, well, of course, because, you know, they seem to be a little older, so. So if they haven't thought about it, they probably should start thinking about it. Well, I would want to challenge that just a bit. Because what I do have time to talk about this morning is not the big death, but the little death that the French talk about when they say le petit mort. So let's think about that, le petit mort, which is that moment of sheer transcendence, sheer loss of identity because you had an orgasm. Yeah. And when you have that moment of transcendence, you taste that death or so they say, the people that have gone there and come back and been able to talk about it. So we linger with that possibility, yeah? Second definition to la petite mort is that event or events that preview your life or prefigure your life before your death. Like it's something so shattering, like a divorce, the sudden loss of a friend that you didn't get to say goodbye because they ran to the store and a car hit them, an illness, the loss of your big dream, whatever it is. That is what I want to talk about this morning, because I really believe that that is a calling. And that's what death facilitates so beautifully, at least in my life. And my calling is sex and death, and not in that order. Even though our rational mind would say to us that, of course, sex is the doorway in, and death is the doorway out to this experience. And so as a human being, as an artist, filmmaker, storyteller, artist, and particularly as a parent, I want to know more about that. And everything I take on has that subject to it one way or another. And so let's go back to your movie for a second. Now, if your calling is not that, you might be wondering, well, how do you decide that your calling is sex and death? Well, I'll tell you. Some le petite mort moments. And for me, they occurred when I was tiny. And I think it had to do with sleeping in the family bed. Anybody sleep in the family bed? You missed a great opportunity. And sleeping in the family bed because my parents fell madly in love with the perfect stranger when they were 14 and 18, and they ran off together. And they had their first child when they were 16 and 20. And so this is the late 50s, early 60s, and so they didn't have, they couldn't afford the luxury of their wild, passionate, young love. So that meant that we would all pile into the smallest spaces. And that's how most human beings on this planet, in this continent, live. They live tribally. It'd be like bedfellows here. We'd be all kind of sleeping nearby, right? Together. But in my case, the same room. So in my dark room, there was almost what I felt as a kid, a nightly ritual where I would hear my father say, "Is she asleep?" And I was in the cot next to them, right? And then I would feel my mother's body lean forward to try to catch my breath, and that was my first acting role. Because I knew, and it was Academy Award-winning performance. So I knew that I had to, because I'm intuitive, I had to get that I needed to act asleep for whatever purpose, whatever reason. But then the spectacular thing would occur. The most incredible energy would enter the room because I couldn't see what they were doing, but I could hear it, and it sounded completely primal. My mother sounded like a wild bird of some kind. And at times it felt like he was hurting her because they would be like, but I didn't necessarily hear her complaining in pain necessarily. And so what fascinated me more than that was what I was feeling in my own body. And I was pretty tiny. It's as if I had been plugged into the electric socket on the wall. It was the wall. It was like, oh, wow. What is that? What is it that I am experiencing? And I couldn't just sit up and go, hey, what's up? I wish I had, though. I would have loved to have heard them explain it to me. But because they did not, it made for an instant calling from my big life. Like I was going to be fascinated by that energy because it felt like a true deity. It didn't feel like about them. It felt bigger, stronger, rapturous, and ecstatic. And it's like, I want more of that, whatever that is. Okay, Le Petit Port 1. We'll call that the discovery of rapture. Second big Le Petit Mort was when I'm literally coming of age. I'm now 11 going on 12. And it's 1970, and I know it's a Sunday night because the Ed Sullivan Show is on. Now, you might be too young to remember what that was, but it was the variety show where the Beatles, remember, first came to America. Well, this is 1970. So I am at my grandmother's house because she's the only one with a TV set, and it's my father's 40th birthday. And I am waiting for Ed Sullivan to come on because tonight the Beatles are going to release their big Let It Be song, and they're going to do it through a video clip, a film clip from their documentary. So I am there, and so is my grandmother. We're waiting. And then there's a hunk outside, and it's my parents, because they're going to go celebrate my father's birthday. He's 40. And they're going to the burger place down the street, and they have my 2-year-old sister with them. And so they honk, and I'm like, no, 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 no. Let it be, okay? I want to see Let It Be. They're like, okay. But now, in reflection, it was a meta moment, because what I was really saying was, let the murder be. I do not have to witness that. Because what was going to happen is that my father was going to arrive at the burger place, family restaurant, and there was going to be 3 brothers there from the ages of 18 to 30. And my mother couldn't hear the conversation they were having, but it quickly turned unpleasant, and she heard him say, have respect, my family is there. Next thing she knows, it's a scuffle, he's been stabbed, he's bleeding to death on the ground with my little sister in her arms. Now, it took years for us to even understand what that was about, but an uncle, my mother's brother, one day said they weren't supposed to kill him. They were supposed to scare him. It's 1970, and the Nixon administration has just passed the No Drug Act, and so they're cracking down on little communities, particularly pot growers that grow farming in their own backyard, and that's what those 3 brothers did. And the feds had come into town, and it's a little town, and my father had had a conversation with them, and they had heard about it. So they wanted to straighten that out very quickly because it was their livelihood at that time. That was Le Petit number 2, which was the discovery of tragedy. Now, as a playwright, as a screenwriter, I have to deal with the classic structure of tragedy every time. Because within tragedy is a character flaw that we all have, right? So I investigate that in every work that I do. Within 6 months of that Le Petit moment, 6 months later, it's August 3rd, 1970, I just turned 12, and Hurricane Celia has just touched ground in South Texas. And it's still probably the most expensive hurricane that's hit our part of the world. Well, I'm fast asleep. We live by a creek, and suddenly the waterworks siren goes off like there's a war, like we're going to be, destroyed if we don't get up and leave immediately. My mother runs into the room and says, we got to grab our things, we got to go. As we leave, the water is literally waist deep. We're literally struggling to get to the car. And an uncle is there trying to help people out, and we try to get him in the car, and he's like, no, 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 it's fine. I got to help some other people. Well, we never see him again because a current of water gets a hold of him, pushes him against the chain link fence, and he drowns. Of course, we're not going to find him for another week when the water finally resides. So within a 6-month period, I had had the murder of my father, which taught me that terrible things can happen to perfectly good people. There's no like, oh, God was looking the other way. No, it's bigger than that. And then suddenly, the most awe-inspiring thing, like a natural disaster, is changing the course of everything, because now we've lost everything we own. So we go up to the designated shelter, and I have to tell you that that's when I've discovered my community. Because just like you know intuitively to get together to create great things in the world, the most extraordinary people show up when you are at your worst. And I saw that that's why these things happen, because these were people I would have never connected with otherwise. So that was the beginning of another significant lifelong calling. Know who you're with and where you're going and who's going to be there to meet you, right? Well, I want to tell you about another image that a week later, after the water had finally receded, and I'm a kid, right? So I want to go see what that did to our house. And I'm the first one out of the car, and there's a thick, the mud is like 3 inches deep, which is fabulous for a 12-year-old, right? Because you're like skating through the mud. I open the door, and what greets me? Our refrigerator from 2 rooms back. So that was the first indication that, wow, that's powerful, because it made it through 2 rooms. That's a heavy-ass thing to move, right? So I look at the refrigerator like, and right at my peripheral, I notice underneath me something moving. And it's about a 4-foot snake. And it's slithering, so happy to see me that I open the door because it's been stuck in our living room for a week. And it slithers out, and I know intuitively to just be still like a monk. And as it slides past me, it leaves this giant S, like, surrender, Dorothy, surrender. And as I observe it move and leave its print behind, buried in the dirt is an engagement diamond ring. Doesn't belong to anybody in my family. I don't know where it came from or how far from the Gulf of Mexico it came, and whose beautiful eye-to-eye moment that was, will you marry me? But now I'm holding it, so I can't help but get, even as a 12-year-old, I am engaged to the snake. Think about that. All the ancient cultures know to respect that image. In the Christian tradition, it gets a bad rap. You know, it was the naughty snake. But in reality, the more ancient cultures, it's the core of our being. It's our spine. It's where the chakras begin from that rapture and move on to the, and then open up like a flower. And I could go on, and you might have me back for the snake talks. Okay, Ben? Because that animal became my teaching animal. You know, like all the Aladdin, like all the Disney, there's that little animal. That's my animal. And when it shows up, it's always instructive for me in my dreams. It tells me, you're about to go through a very shattering experience, but the wisdom and the pearl that will be given to you, if not the diamond, is extraordinary. But how do you live through snake and snake bites, right? Which is the topic of death. So I want you to take in for a moment where you are. Because these are examples of me being introduced to rapture, tragedy, and awe-inspiring natural disaster. As you can tell by my language, those of you that maybe study the hero's journey in any way, and I do because I teach writers and I teach artists, and the hero's journey, what I've been talking about is probably step 3, which is the refusal of the call. There's what we plan, and there's what happens. Like one of my most favorite lyrics of all time is John Lennon's, "Life is what happens to you while you're busy making other plans." So I want you to take that in for a moment, because even in this room, let's close our eyes again. In this room, when you went into your dark room, and those 2 questions flashed, I want you to notice that I get your purpose, I get your straight line arrow that you're shooting into the sky for where you want to be. But I want you to notice that because we're taking a bow and honoring the power of myth this morning through someone like extraordinary, like Joseph Campbell, he would say to you, my friends, if you can see your path, it's somebody else's. Your path can only be exactly where you're standing right now. So notice for a moment and let that in, and let something else flash to your deepest imagination about what might be calling you, because he'll say, you have to be willing to give up the life you planned for the one that's waiting for you. And my experience about what waits for me is not what I know about. So just be with yourself for just a moment and let that in. For some of you, something might surprise you, and if nothing happens, no worries. Nothing is beautiful too. So gently open your eyes again. And this idea, like for example, I'm not a very sophisticated tweeter, or I look at what you guys are doing and I'm like, but somehow I got on the tweets with Dalai Lama. And so I got one yesterday that I thought, oh, this must be for you guys. Because I'm here now. And it was a simple statement where he said, there's only 2 untrue things: yesterday and tomorrow. There's only where you are right now. Now, I want you to let that in, because this is not just an older woman Like at the end of the hero's journey, the elder comes and tells you what they learned. Yes, that's going on. But I can tell you that I started in day one as a little child, and I have memory of being in my mother's womb even, but that's another book and another story. When you do that one, okay, Ben? So the idea is that how can there be no past? Remember the movie is still going? Remember in the dark room? It's still going on without you, and I forgot to tell you. You're about to be called out of it, and you're not going to get the end of the movie. But I can tell you one thing. I'm in an intimate relationship with the deities known as death and love, which I equate to sex. There's no separation for me. But my next big project is going to be a research project that's going to be, I'm not sure if it's going to be for the screen or it's going to be for the stage, but it's about Wilhelm Reich. Does anybody know who that is? He essentially started the sexual revolution of the 60s with his books, which our government quickly burned and destroyed, because he discovered something phenomenal, and he escaped Nazi Germany at the time. He was a psychotherapist. He discovered what he called orgone energy, organic, which is orgasmic energy that runs the universe. The whole horizon and the sky is made of this extraordinary energy. And he created one of the first communes in the United States. And he would create this box that he had received information that if you sat in it, it would make you well. And it did. He ended up like curing cancer. He cured these ridiculous things with orgasm energy. And the government outlawed that pretty quickly. So I say that because that's a fascinating character to me. Someone that was thrown into prison in the United States during the McCarthy period, and they burned most of his books. But a few have remained, and I'm definitely interested in his vision. Because like Einstein said, and I strongly recommend this reading when like your little glossary before I leave, go read the letter he wrote to his daughter. It's called The Love Letter to His Daughter. And he tells you, do not even publish this till I'm gone for about 50 years, because nobody will understand it and nobody will believe it. And he talks about the entity of love. It's a deity. It's a force so extraordinary that he couldn't even speak of it as a physicist without sounding like, like he was being woo-woo. Check it out. Gift yourself that gift. Or, like Steve Jobs said at the end, wow. He was having an orgasm as he was going out the door. Wow. 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 And that's how I feel this morning, and I'll just be nice about it. Thank you.